Welcome to Lady Jane Books. Oh my goodness, it's happening. It's happening. Finally, I have one of my best booktube buddies, Greener Side of Sam, on Lady Jane Books' channel. I'm so excited. Hi, Sam. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm excited to be here and talk about this book that I kind of remember.
Okay, so in full disclosure, we were just talking about this. We read this, I think, back in April, right? It was like the beginning of
hmm
April, and it's
hmm
now August. That's a lot of time to remember a book. So we're gonna have full disclosure. We don't remember a lot of it, but what we do remember is memorable. So we're gonna talk about the bits and pieces that we do remember. Starting off, we read Geisha, a Life by Mineko Iwasaki. And I believe, Sam, you picked this book out for us to read. Do
Yeah,
I remember that correctly?
yes, I did
Okay.
because I really liked the book Memoirs of a Geisha. And then when I picked out this book, I was like, oh, this kind of gives a more realistic view of how it actually was. So I was very interested in this book.
Yeah. I remember I read Memoirs of a Geisha when I was in high school. And it was about, I think it was like yeah, I don't remember when, but I read it in high school and the teacher was like, "You're reading so advanced. Here's a special book." And I loved it. And that's actually when I started reading for pleasure again because I liked Memoirs of a Geisha so much. It was such a different story from anything else I read. So when you said you liked it, I was like, "Oh, that's so cool." And then you had suggested the story, and I think this is the memoir in which Memoirs of a Geisha was based off. Is that right, Sam?
Yes, that's right. And also, you mentioned you reading that book in high school. I read that book in high school too, and that's what ignited my like passion for reading again. So I was
Yes, yes.
like, what we were just talking about, it just flew through my mind.
So we just that this was the memoir that inspired Memoir of a
Yes,
Geisha.
memoir.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Um, and Um, I believe she wanted to write this because Memoirs of a Geisha um, kind of got some things wrong, and she wanted to like clarify. Even though it was a fictional book, she wanted to clarify how it actually was. And I really, really liked the beginning of the story about how she was talking about her childhood and how
Mm,
I remember her family, they had money and then they didn't have money. And I thought it was so, so sad that like a lot of her siblings and her including were well, oh yeah, not her yet. Most of her siblings were like sold off
mm.
to become
Yes, that's
geishas.
right.
And then her dad, I think, because wasn't she the youngest?
I think so. I think she was either the
Okay.
youngest or second youngest, but I think she was the youngest.
Yeah, and then her dad kind of let her choose if she wanted to be one or not.
Yeah, I remember that. And something that really stood out to me right as the book started was that they gave her that choice, and she was little. She couldn't have been like 4 years old or something like that. Like when they started talking about this life, so I thought that was very interesting. That in this dynamic of their family, that she had that it felt like she was choosing which college to go to when she was 4 years old, and this is her entire life. So I thought that was very interesting. That kind of took me aback when I first started it. um, but yeah, it kind of started off with that very very different, like, oh my goodness, this is setting up for the rest of the story, and she's like 4. Wow. So I thought that was very interesting and a great way to start off the memoir. Before we go on, I'm going to just say hello to some people. Hi, Anne with the book. How are you? So excited. Excited learning about the nonfiction version of Memoirs of a Geisha. Yep, that's right. And here we are. I was surprised to learn that Mineko Iwasaki is still alive today. I would love to meet her. Yes, yes. I looked that up actually after we read it as well, and I was surprised too. And that would be a really cool conversation. Don't you think, Sam? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I really like how much time she took explaining her childhood,
Mm.
and how her love of dancing really shaped her choice of wanting to become a geisha. And she wanted to become the best dancer, and she actually did. Sorry, my kids are in the
Didn't even
background.
hear him.
I really wish, I think the biggest thing that I wanted to see happen was at the end. Um, it was more like when she was explaining her adult life, it was very, very rushed. And I
Yeah.
wish that she would have expanded a lot more on her in her adult life of what happened then.
I agree. I think if I recall correctly, we had said that she did spend so much time in her like childhood and her adolescence and her growing up to be a geisha. And then once she was, it kind of like ended there. And
Yeah.
it skipped over a lot of things that were like, wait a second, wasn't this the whole buildup of the entire story? And I
Hmm.
know I got a little bit frustrated with that. I think you did too. Was that a
Hmm.
fair assessment? Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that was my biggest critique of the story. I think I loved hearing her story, but that was the only thing I was really disappointed by it. I was like, I want to hear all the juicy details about what happened.
Well, I think also the way the book left off, and I think this was the biggest like issue for me as well, is that she just kind of quit. It sounded just like she
Yeah.
just kind of quit. And we're like, wait a minute, you dedicated your entire life to this. You kind of
Hmm.
glossed over, you alluded to some problems, like structurally, or I don't know. And
Hmm.
then all of a sudden you're like, yep, I'm done. And that was it.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
everybody was surprised too because I believe she retired early as well. Like people
Hmm.
thought that she would have a much longer career as a geisha than she did. So that's kind of annoyed me too. That I'm like, wait, I want to know what happened. What's going on? What are you talking about? So yeah. So unfortunately, I do think the ending was rather disappointing. But
Hmm.
overall, I think it was a pretty good story.
Yeah. Also, can we talk about what type of character she was? Hi,
Yes.
Jason.
Hi, Jason. How are you? Thanks for tuning in. Nice to see you. Um, yes, she was tough. She is a tough lady.
Yeah.
What did you think about that, Sam? I'm curious.
Well, I think given the industry and how it was kind of structured, she almost had to be.
Mm.
Because if you weren't in that type of industry, then you would be taken advantage of. Or I could see that happening. Because I remember she, I believe there was a couple scenes in the story where she would just be walking down the street and men would just try and grab her.
Yeah.
And she was just like, no, and she would just punch him or something like that. And then, there was something with, um, like a cigar or a cigarette in
Oh, yes, I
on somebody's
remember.
hand. I
Yeah,
can't
somebody
remember
burned her hand.
exactly.
I think it was a
Yes.
fellow geisha that she got jealous about the attention she was having.
Hmm.
And I believe that, she kind of explored this theme that she was supposed to be very obedient and,
Hmm.
very docile. And if my memory serves, I believe there's a portion in the book where the elder geisha used that against her and they burn her hand with a cigar or
Hmm.
cigarette. And that really just, that bothered me so much that she had that type of trauma and that type of interaction with the people around
Yeah.
her because I was under the impression that it's a very close knit community. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like there's this, it's pretty exclusive. There's not that many um, people who work as a geisha. And I don't know, it really kind of took me back when I was like, ooh, that they're a little bit hostile with each other. So,
Yeah, and how she was describing about how she would do certain things in the I can't remember what it's named, the house of
mhm.
where everybody was housed, and she wanted to get her own apartment, but then when she got her own apartment, she didn't really know how to do regular things like cooking. because it was
Cleaning.
already all done for, yes, because it was
Mm.
already all done for her. And I thought that was very, very interesting too.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I thought that was actually kind of an interesting juxtaposition to her life in the house
Mhm.
versus, what we consider like outside life or even modern. I don't know if that's the right word. That's probably not the right word. But Anne brings up a really great point saying, I wonder why she condensed her later life. Perhaps it was impactful to her. Like trauma of an early age stood out more than a memory than later.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a great point, Anne. And I think that comes through in the book. It definitely does.
Mhm.
I think that might have been one of her most like frequently asked questions. Well, how did you become a geisha? How did you, pick this
Mhm.
life? And she dedicated a lot of the book to answering that question.
Yeah, and I do actually, now that she brought that up, I do like that she did that. I found it interesting how she described herself as very much introverted, and
Yes.
she didn't like to be around people very much, but she was like the top geisha in the nation. And I would have loved to see her like dance, and
Yes.
because she is known to be one of the best dancers from that time.
I agree. I just the description of her performances was so amazing. And
Hmm.
that's one thing that I really liked about this book is how descriptive she was on little details like the clothing, like the
Hmm.
food, the process, the dancing. It felt very immersive. And I love that we got those details to and could almost experience it with her. So I
Hmm.
agree with that wholeheartedly, Sam.
And I also liked how she clarified a lot of things. Where like so in Memoirs of Geisha, uh the book was very much centered around like you will not have relationships, you can't do this, you can't do that. Where she clarified you can have relationships, it's just not common because of the type of work that you do. Um, so stuff like that, and how she clarified that they aren't and were never really like sex workers, like Memoirs of Geisha painted that picture.
Hmm.
And um, and it almost makes me kind of a little frustrated that the author of Memoirs of a Geisha would write it in that way. If that's not how it was, that almost it gives a disservice to these women, and it paints them in a bad life when this is not what it was supposed to be at all, you know?
And I wonder if that's part of the reason that she wrote this book, too. That's
Hmm.
probably one of the ones that when she said, I want to set the record straight, and she did.
Hmm. Yeah,
Hmm.
I think that was really good of her. And um, also, I wanted to know more about why she married. I can't remember his name, but at the very end, it was only like a very short little chapter about the guy she married. But she talked mostly about the man who she, I think it was an affair. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he had a wife and he was going to leave
Yes,
his wife, but he
but
never
he wasn't
did.
gonna, no. Oh, and
Yeah,
the hotel
yeah,
issue. Yeah, that he moved her out of
yes,
their hotel room and moved the wife in. Ooh, that was brutal. That was a
yeah.
tough one. That was a
Yeah,
tough
but I do like how she was so honest about, or it seemed like she was very honest and genuine about what happened and like the mistakes that she made. And I liked that she took that approach.
Yes, it's very unflinching. It's a very
Hmm.
unflinching portrait of her life and her choices as well.
Hmm. Oh, also, her older sister. Can we talk about her older sister and her relationship with her?
Oh, I
I
don't
can't.
remember too
It
much.
started with her with a Y. It was like I think Yonoko.
Hmm. Oh yes,
Maybe
I
that was her
now I'm
name.
recalling. Was this the one that she had a nephew from?
Yes.
Yes.
And
Okay.
it was the one that was sold off
She
first.
was like, yeah, she
And
was
she was so
an older one.
resentful of her parents that they did that to her for money. And she just like the rest of her life she was just so um
Miserable.
miserable, yeah, because of it. And I realized that you know, in those times it might have been a little bit different, but I can understand her frustration. If something like that happened to me, I would just be so angry about it, and I would be so sad that somebody would do that to me, because it's just like you don't know how, I mean, how could a parent do that to you? So I understand her pain and frustration. I don't think she should have taken it out on her younger sister.
No.
I don't think that was right, because she didn't do anything to her. But I can understand why she was angry.
Well, I think also there's a big juxtaposition of, you know, the Mineko, I think her name is Mineko.
Mineko. Yeah.
Mineko. Mineko drives home this point that she chose this life ever since she was a child, and she works for it. She loves it. She lives and breathes it. There's a big difference of seeing a sibling choose something that you've hated your entire life and you've resented. So I do understand that there's a little bit of strife from the older sister, because, you know, here she is fighting it tooth and nail, and she's seeing her younger sister being like, this is the greatest thing ever. And so I can understand the older sister's frustrations. Again, I don't think it was verbalized very well, but I can 1000% understand why there's all those frustrations from her older sister and resentment.
It makes me wonder if that's where Arthur Golden got the inspiration for Hatsumomo.
That's what I thought too. That's what I thought. And then as soon as we were reading that character, I was like, oh yeah. So I agree.
I definitely
think
but
inspiration.
I loved her writing style. I think she painted the whole world of it very nicely. I loved hearing about the grandmother. Again, I can't remember her name, but she just sounded like the sweetest little old lady that actually genuinely cared for Mineko.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Yes, I do think she was loved by her family, but it's a hard thing for me to visualize that, you know, her father loved her so much, but he let her go so early. And of course it sounds like it worked out for her, but I couldn't imagine being her father in that. You know what I mean? Like, this is your small child. She's choosing a life that's pretty difficult, and you have to step back and let her make that choice. That was a hard thing for me to read personally.
Yeah, and then, I mean, at 5 she went into it for the dancing, which I can really understand, and that's what she loved. But then there's also the things that came with it that were bad, like having to entertain people who were like nasty and did not have her best interest in mind and would harass her. And that's not something that at 5 you would understand. And so I think in that sense that's very hard to picture. And I like my daughter, my oldest is 3.5, and I couldn't imagine like just sending her off to a school knowing
having to pick a career, a lifelong career. Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad that I would be happy if she wanted to dance, but just to give her away. And also in the house they actually adopted her, so her family wasn't her family anymore. I mean, they were still her biological family, but they weren't in charge of her choices anymore. And so that is just, I think it would be a life that would be so it sounds like very honorable in that culture, but it also would be very difficult.
I agree.
That not everybody could do, like her older sister, where she was like, I just can't do this.
I agree. I definitely agree. And also I was taken aback by the sheer amount of work she was doing every single day. And when she was training to be a geisha, she would talk about, okay, I got up at like dawn, and then I prepped, I went to entertain these people. Then I went to parties, then I did this, and I didn't get home until like midnight, and then I had to wake up at 1 a.m. And I'm like, how? Like, how do you do that and not,
Yeah, it
drop?
wasn't like it was portrayed in Memoirs of Geisha where Hatsimomo would just kind of lounge around and do
Yeah.
whatever.
Like,
You know,
maybe she'll go to a party, maybe not, probably not.
yeah. Yeah, it seemed like they all worked very hard, and the detail put into the outfit was just
Gorgeous.
incredible. And also, I believe they had to. She explained having to sleep on a pillow that just like goes under your neck so it doesn't mess up your hair. And I couldn't imagine having to learn how to sleep like that.
I have a hard enough time sleeping in curlers. Like, I could not imagine
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's also circling back. One of the things that I've loved is that she was so detailed about where the kimonos come from and their intricacies and their detailing. I loved that. Yeah, I love fashion anyway, you know me. But
Oh
I
yeah.
thought that was really special, and I love that she focused so much on how unique these pieces are and the craftsmanship. I love that. That I think was the best part.
Yeah, I just the whole it was almost like being immersed into another world.
I
And that's
agree.
what I liked about it. So I would definitely recommend this book to anybody who liked Memoirs of a Geisha.
Definitely. I would second that opinion. I think this is a very interesting book. I think it's a very insightful story as well. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you picked it, Sam. I'm so glad.
Oh, thanks. You can pick the next book.
I will. I will. Don't you worry. I got a couple coming up. Any closing thoughts, Sam? Anything that last words you want to say?
Um, I just I think the biggest thing is that I think she did a really good job with the story overall, and I just wish I would have learned more about her adult life because her childhood, her speaking about it was just so beautiful.
I agree. I agree. That yeah, if I could fix one thing about this book is that I would want to know the why she left. Because the whole book is dedicated about this beautiful, wonderful world, all the parties she's going to, the fashion, the culture, a wonderful
Yeah.
story, and then it just like ends, and she's like, I can't do this anymore. I don't know if it's burnout or what, but I would want to know a little bit more about why. But maybe she couldn't. Maybe there were legal reasons why she couldn't. I don't know, but
Maybe. Who
that could be
knows?
it. Yeah. And then Anne with the book says, I definitely want to read it and probably reread Memoirs of a Geisha again and to notice the differences. That's a good idea, Anne.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I want to read it again too. Oh gosh, I read that book like 5 times.
I read it once and I liked it, but I'd never reread it. I'm a big rereader. I don't reread books. But maybe I'll have to reread it for Anne.
Yeah.
Yeah, for Anne.
We'll all
And
read it together.
new little book club. Okay, so that is, I think, it. That was our thoughts as much as we could remember them.
Right.
Thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. This was very impromptu, and we really appreciate that you joined us today. Thank you, Sam, for being here at Lady Jane Books. It's always such a good time talking to you, and we have to go figure out what the next breed is going to be.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you later.
Bye.